Hey SaaStr fans, I'm Gretchen, COO here at SaaStr. Excited to welcome you to the third installment of our webcast series, Ask Me Anything, which we're calling Lunch With. Every other week-ish, we bring in the best in SaaS to talk about the questions that you care about most. We've got some great guests today. We have some great ones coming up. If you missed the one last time with Brendan Cassidy, who is the VP of Sales at EchoSign, it's got 6,000 views on YouTube, so I think it's pretty awesome. We've got David Ulovich, who just sold OpenDNS to Cisco, and your second favorite SaaS VC, Jason Green of Emergence, coming up, so make sure you subscribe to the calendar. Today, we are going to dive into aligning sales and marketing, which is like a lot of maybe just lip service, or is it actually real? We've got some great guests today to help answer this and more. But it is an AMA, so make sure that you tweet in your questions, whatever you want to talk about, using the hashtag SaaStrAMA. But you guys always wait till the last minute, and then you send them in, and then we can't answer all of them, so tweet now. So, without further ado, let's introduce our great guest today. So, first up, of course, we have the newly monikered godfather of SaaS, Jason Lumpkin, joining us.
All right, thanks for having me, Gretchen.
I love that name. And then two very, very special guests. The first is David Cummings, who is a serial entrepreneur and an investor. David co-founded Pardot in 2007, which is a marketing automation company, if you're not into this, in a super, super competitive space. And then sold it to ExactTarget in 2012, I think for just under $100 million. And then eventually ExactTarget was acquired by Salesforce, in case you're trying to connect those dots. And then David's done a number of other companies, and most recently he's doing a partner at Atlanta Ventures, which from what I can tell is doing like everything in the world to support the entrepreneurial community there. From investing to running an accelerator to like an actual physical building, the Atlanta Tech Village, that's like this amazing hub. It's like the biggest thing going on in the Southeast right now. So we'll talk to David about that too, because it's pretty awesome to give back to the community that way. And then another awesome guest, one of my favorite people, Craig Rosenberg. Craig is the chief analyst and co-founder of TOPO. TOPO is a research and consulting firm that really will help you come in and align sales and marketing, topical, right? And really rock out your revenue targets. But if you guys have been paying attention in sales and marketing, I don't know, anytime over the past decade, then you know Craig better as the Funnelholic. He's been blogging about this stuff since 2006. So what's really great about having him here today is that not only does he have the perspective of time to offer us, but he's also got a view offer over like 100 or even maybe thousands of companies. So we'll kick things off now, and then I'll hand it over to you guys. So Craig, you've been writing about this for like 10 years, right, almost? So what's changed, like beyond the tools? Is there's something that's like fundamentally shifted in like sort of the human dynamic and that's solved by the tools, or is it basically the same with like better measurement?
So you asked, I feel like there's a setup. I feel like there's a bit of a
It might be. Question. I'm just trying to get you to, you know, be your normal candid self.
I am, and I just want to say one thing on it was funny in the intros. You're like, and we got the godfather of SaaS, and then we got David Cummings, and then we got this guy who's just standing. You know, he's here too. Wait, what's Craig Rosenberg? He's a blogger. He's great. So, well, look, if we're gonna, I think here's my view of kind of what's happened. I'd love to get everyone's take because I think, you know, I'll just start with this. Is I think. We all talk about sales and marketing alignment in the blogosphere from the vendor perspective, like from a high-level perspective. But then when you meet in a room with a VP of sales or a VP of demand gen, we're still not there yet, and that is qualitative and it's real, right? And I think, we still see breakage. We have this new breakage, right, with the rise of sales development. When we pulled sales development leaders, like what's the, what sort of, how would you describe your relationship with sales today? And, 60% or so said there's still lack of alignment with sales right there. So it's like, we still, look, I think we're a lot farther along, which I'll get to in a sec, but I don't believe that, I still think it's a holy grail, like full like sales and marketing alignment. And like I said, we're seeing now we've added this new, we haven't, it's old. Sales development's been around for a long time, but it's clearly like this like massive emerging practice. And now we're asking them, and they don't feel like they're aligned. And then you ask them, are they getting the right leads from marketing? And they're saying they're not getting the right leads from marketing. So, look, when you put people in the room, I don't believe that sales and marketing alignment is there quite yet. Here's my feeling, though, like as a looking at the market, I do believe that in a broad target market, particularly against SMB and mid-market type of targets, where you sell to a lot of people, right, a wide ICP or ideal customer profile, I do believe we see highly efficient, highly scalable, relatively aligned, let's call it very aligned revenue machines. We absolutely do, right? Demand gen's running, Pardot, Marketo, whatever that might be, right? They're out there on the internet, they're procuring leads, they're flowing through sales development, they're passing to inside sales in a really predictable manner. They've created like very predictable, growing teams that work really well. Where I see the breaks today is, and it sort of coincides with the rise of account-based marketing, is when the targets get tighter, this sort of industrial strength demand gen, breaks down, right? And so an example of tighter might be, well, look, like we can look at the target market, but really we only sell to these specific targets, or enterprise, or whatever that might be. We still have sort of we've created like a monster, because it's like demand gen now today, a good demand gen person can say to the organization, I've created thousands of leads, right? But when we're still misaligned on who the buyer should be and who we need to feed, that's where I still see a major breakdown. Long rant. I'll just let you guys sort of react to what I just said.
Well, I want to hear from David, but Craig, let me ask you out of that, since it's December, do you have a New Year's resolution or two to get more alignment in sales and marketing? I was literally at a 2016 planning meeting yesterday of a SaaS company I'm on the board on, and they're planning to do 15 million next year, and we just went through our own version of, we called them KPIs, but you could call them New Year. What are your resolutions? What are some takeaways?
Well, look, I think the big thing here is this, I think we would all agree, when I mentioned sort of ideal customer profile and target market, a lot of, the recommendations change based on who you sell to. But I think ideally, as we want to sort of create alignment and have these very predictable revenue machines, I think you've got to look at two things now. One is, look, the past couple of years, we have seen industrial strength, predictable revenue machines against wide, small, mid-market teams. You have to be able to look at your organization and say, is the inside sales team, if I add this person and I add this amount of leads, how much more revenue will I get? That we have to get there, because we have proven that works.
Yes.
But for 2016, and Jason, I'd love your perspective on this. Here's what we're hearing is like, company X gets to 50 million, and the board says, how do you get to 100 or 150 million? And they say, we got to get bigger clients. They go hire field reps, and that industrial strength demand gen process is broken. We solve it by outbound. That serves a little bit, right? I think the big thing here is there's this new emerging practice in demand gen. Everyone's calling account-based marketing. I believe in it. We need a new organization within our within marketing. We used to call it field marketing. I think we're going to call it account-based marketing. And these guys are tasked with a number to deliver deliver opportunities to these big targets or these very isolated targets. Yeah. That is the key to 2016. You got to believe it, because I'm telling you, Jason, like right now I'll go in and they're like, they've been to every Marketo summit, they've read everything, they could spit off MQLs, SQLs, all these things, they're doing lead nurturing, they love scoring, they do all this stuff, and sales is like, what the hell, like you're delivering 10% of the revenue to my big money guys, and that's like, okay guys, you are doing a good job, like keep feeding the machine down here, but we have this new machine that's going to deliver massive amount of revenue, and we have to look at the world a little bit differently there, and so for me, that's the movement in 2016. 2016.
Yeah, David, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's funny when we had, and David's the first investor in Co. Can you guys all hear me? Are we, David, can you hear me?
Yep.
Just double checking. When Kyle from SalesLoft was on the other week, he was talking a lot about SDR-based account management and we've got, account-based management is a buzzword today, right? Everyone's thinking about this. John Miller, who he knows, New Startup is all about account-based management. So is there something, what are you seeing? Is there something new in this concept about more strategically attacking it? And Craig talked about doing it when you get bigger, right? If I want to do these big deals and this misalignment. Do you have any, is it something you've been thinking about at all?
Yeah, one of the hottest companies here in the Tech Village and in our Atlanta Ventures portfolio is a company called Terminus.com.
That's right. All right. So you are all about account-based management.
I'm all in.
So besides the promotion, tell us the
commercial there is that.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Terminus is the original name.
Step back for 1 minute. You founded Pardot, right? Actually, you, among other things, you basically co-founded or first invested Terminus and SalesLoft, right? And there may even be a third or fourth one I'm missing, right?
There's five more.
And a lot of that theme is about specialization, right, around these systems, right? So talk about Terminus and then talk about the themes that you've learned too, right? Because you're teasing into all of these things that Craig talked about.
Exactly. So for Terminus, the original idea or impetus came from seeing the announcement that Facebook and then Google and LinkedIn were allowing direct targeted advertising based on a unique email address, right? So in the consumer world, you don't usually have emails, or if you do, it's too broad or too macro. But in the business world, if I can show a specific ad to a specific person based on their email address, that's super powerful. And then, of course, I want to use technology to automate that, serve up a more targeted, more specialized ad. And so Terminus evolved over time, and it's focused directly on account-based marketing. It's complementary to John Miller's Engagio. And the core offering right now, it's going to expand over time, but the core offering right now is the idea that just like in the consumer world, you'd go and you'd look at a watch on a website, and then you go to CNN.com and you'd see a retargeting ad for that watch that you just looked at. And retargeting's been around for a long time, and it's been very successful, very powerful. Yeah. Taking that same principle, that same concept, and applying it to the business context and business advertising. So going in, taking your data out of Salesforce, out of Pardot, and saying, okay, I got 100 opportunities in the pipeline. Here are the 10 most common job titles that I sell to. Yep. Here are their email addresses, or here are their names, usernames in different systems, and then showing targeted ads based on where they are in the buying cycle. And then the idea of tracking it and, of course, showing the contribution to that sales process. So what's the ROI? Shorter sales cycle, bigger deal size, higher win rate, and then using that from a technology point of view. So yeah, I'm super excited about account-based marketing. I think it's going to be huge.
Got it. And so just to step back and Craig had too, so because I'm a little bit, I'm learning here too, right? So when a customer goes to buy, it's bought by the VP of marketing, director of demand gen, and going to Craig's point, they've sort of segmented the tools that they want to buy, and they buy something like this to target the higher end accounts, right? Versus managing whatever, using another system like Pardot or whatnot to manage their typical inbound flow for more velocity. Is that the segmentation that they're tapping into?
We look at it, at least from the Terminus point of view, as really on the nurturing. So it's really, at this point, it's display ad nurturing of prospects that are already in the pipeline or named accounts that you're already going after.
Yeah.
So at least right now in the Terminus world, we see it as more of a nurturing tool.
I got it. Well, let's step back because Craig brought up some good points for the founders, which are our core audience, right? So I'm just getting to a couple million in revenue or $1 million in revenue, right? And I'm starting to figure out that my customers are segmented. They're small, medium, and large, right? And so and now I'm realizing, and I just figured out what marketing automation is. And let's say I'm a Salesforce customer. I'm using Pardot, right? And use Terminus as an example. Am I adding this to my toolkit for my larger customers, or how should I think about bifurcating my customers from a marketing perspective? And then we can talk about how that impacts sales, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll defer to Craig he's more on the strategic side. I'm more tactical, as this is how we see it, and this is how we do it, and this is the value we get from it. So I want to hear it from the strategic side from Craig.
Well, yeah, I mean, by the way, I don't know if I froze before. I apologize for that. I did. Okay.
All right. We don't. We can accommodate dial-up here. Don't worry.
This AOL account does not seem to work well with Google Hangouts. So look, here's what I would say is I believe that every company should start with a baseline foundation of marketing automation and content, and create that cadence and that flow of sorry, I was worried I froze there. So like, if it's the first thing I'm going to do, in my opinion, the first thing you do is you begin to, after you understand your buyer, you begin to start with industrial strength demand gen, especially if you're small, medium, and large. Because, look, there's only benefits. I think we've all seen it and we know from creating and distributing content. So a lot of the playbook that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years from the Pardot, Marketo, HubSpots of the world, that thing is still in play, and especially if your market, even if it's segmented, it has small and medium, that's a place where you can have a real measurable impact, right? And so everyone should do that. The question is, what you bring up, which is, well, where does Terminus and these folks that are saying that they're account-based marketing, where do they play in? Like, for me, there's lots of applications for Terminus, which I can help. Yeah, I could give David my perspective on. I am a big fan as well of that sort of account-based retargeting market. For me, there's this second exercise, okay, which is, okay, well, like, who are the key accounts that we have to go get? It's one thing to say we sell to everyone 10 plus who has a marketing director who does this. That's great. You should
there's 7,000 startups like that. We sell the 10 plus to a marketing director, right? We sell to 100 plus. Now there's only 6,000 startups, right? So that's
right.
Let's just take a pause for all of us. That's the fundamental. Like, let's take a breath. Like, there's 6,000 companies today trying to sell the marketing directors with 10 or more employees, right? So how do I use these processes and tools and systems to break through that? Because now everyone's going to go, if you're not, everyone's already using something like Pardot, right? And then they'll learn more about ABM. So how do I so keep going, but how do I break through the noise right there? That's step one.
Let me give you a quick targeted example. At Pardot, 3 years ago when we sold the business, we had a very, very specific segment that we went after. We went after companies that had 20 to 200 total employees, of which 5 to 50 of those employees were in sales and marketing, of which they had one full-time in-house marketing manager, and they did Google AdWords for direct response lead gen, and they had salespeople listed in LinkedIn because they had a consultative sales process, and they had a newsletter sign-up box on their website showing that they did some form of email marketing.
Got it. And how big do you remember how big that universe was going back in time? It's well segmented, that's for sure, right?
So we were super segmented, and it was fabulously successful. We focused, from a universe size, the way we talked about it back then is we said, back then, Salesforce.com had 125,000 paying customers, Sugar CRM had 14,000, NetSuite had 8,000, and so we said the universe of currently paying modern web-based CRM users that were in that 20 to 200 people. So we called it 20,000 companies at the time, but growing super fast was our audience. And when we sold the business, we had about 1,000 customers. So
a tenth. You took Salesforce plus Sugar plus NetSuite, and you said you did that segmentation. About a tenth of them, what you thought was your sweet spot, right?
Yeah, sweet spot. Yep.
And you targeted them with human outbound as well as marketing automation, all that. You just had the kids pick up the phone and
almost all SDR AE process. So tons and tons and tons of cold calling. We wrote a little bit of software to scrape websites and automate some of that process of building segmented lists based on our ideal customer profile, and it was super successful.
So let's talk about that just for a minute, and then Craig, we can talk about how the world has and hasn't changed. So going back in time, you identify the 10% of the Salesforce plus NetSuite plus Sugar ecosystem that's your sweet spot. It makes sense. 20 to 200 with the director of demand gen already in an email sign up, and to get to those first couple million in revenue, was that primarily by hiring very inexpensive kids in Atlanta to pick up the phone and call into those accounts?
Exactly. And of course, over time, we got a bunch of second-order revenue, and we ramped up our marketing side. But targeted cold calling to that ideal customer profile was phenomenally successful.
All right, I'm seeing some of the inspiration for SalesLoft right there, right? Which was to productize
Right, yeah.
some of that work.
Army of SDRs. And then, of course, the book Predictable Revenue came out and modified it all, and it was like, oh my gosh, take what's in the book and just make software to support what's in the book.
Yeah.
So,
Craig,
what's the name of the new book?
What's that?
What's the name of the new book? The one that you and Aaron are working on?
Impossible to Inevitable.
Exactly. So I'm sure there's some lessons learned in there that might turn into a software product as well. I don't know. I haven't read the book yet.
Yeah. So Craig, do you think that so that's a great story right there, and there's a lot of if I was founding Pardot today, Pardot 3.0, when there's so many more tools, can I still do that strategy that David just described? Does it work? I mean, sometimes clearly it does, but in these more crowded segments, right? Can I target that director of demand gen that gets 8,000 calls and emails now to seller tools?
Man, it is hard. You could use that example. I'm sure your companies that sell to IT just laugh hysterically as well, right? I don't know any part of the organization anymore that doesn't get 1,000 calls, considering what all the different companies we're creating here in Silicon Valley.
Because we've gotten better at outbound, which we can chat about, right? And so that just drives up the volume, right, as well.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind me leveraging what David just said. So first of all, one of my favorite stories that everyone, when we talk about outbound, is, I always tell them, well, guys, like the marketing automation guys who were telling you that you could get all these leads from marketing and do all this nurturing, those guys were doing outbound, right? And so, okay, got it, right? It's like, well, we want to do the HubSpot model. I'm like, oh, well, they have the most outbound callers in the Northeast. So look, but if you take what David just said years ago, building Pardot, which is an incredible story. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the Pardot story, and like we could go on for. You should write. The book is really interesting on how David and Adam did Pardot, and I respect it. So now you take it, and now you take some of the things David's doing today, instead of just, so one is, I do believe you isolate the ICP, right? And this is a really big deal, and it depends on where you are as a company, but I'll give you a different example. A company that's a Marketo reseller, LeadMD in Arizona, they used to just say, well, we'll sell to anybody with Marketo. And then they took a step back and said, well, wait a minute, like who really buys from us? And they did a lot of work. They used EverString to go look at thousands upon thousands of different data points, and what they learned was something similar to what David just said, is, well, actually the most predictive thing that will tell us someone wants to buy from us is if they have Vidyard on their site. So they have Marketo, Salesforce, they have Vidyard. And then they said, and by the way, it's not just the vertical, it's whether they have, like David said, X amount of marketers, whatever that might be. You got to isolate the ICP, because trying to sell to everyone from an outbound perspective, I think we're all seeing, we told everyone go outbound, and it's like, that's hard, because as you said, there's 8,000 vendors calling into the director demand gen. We got to make a commitment to who we think is really going to buy from us. We got to put a stake in the ground. The second part, though, is to take what David just said. Like, it's not just like the idea of account-based marketing is it's not just outbound. Now we can use a terminus, right? We're calling into someone, and we can start to influence them via retargeting over time, or we use personalization, right? So that when they come to the website, they see that it's them. When we isolate the ICP, we can start to use multi-channels to get to these people, right? And to be delivering the message not just from calling, right? So I'm a big believer in outbound, so don't get me wrong, but as you just said, look, it's hard. Everyone's hitting them. We need to take a multi-channel approach, and for that, you do have to isolate the ICP, because you want to make this commitment to these people and say, I'm going to run Terminus, I'm going to do these things. The last thing I will say is, the way you get above the din today is the next wave for me is scalable personalization. That's, to me, one of the things that we are going to see more and more, because you just cannot go with scripted.
All right, let's chat about that, because that is an important theme. So explain that a little bit more to the audience. Scalable, like people almost understand that, right? But it's so, right? We've been sending out the same friggin' emails to 10,000 people for years, right? And that was great when before we had that, right? So what is scalable, personalized for reals? What is that?
Yeah, so for me, it's that in the touches that we make to a particular account or lead contact, whatever, however you want to think about these people, can we deliver a message that's relevant to them and do it at scale? And that's just, I'm trying to put it in simple terms. And I'll give you two examples. Example number one is an outbound email. And, even 20% of customization off 3 minutes of research to just give someone something relevant to them is going to make a huge difference in your conversion rates to conversation. If you do run Terminus, one of the things that's really cool when you talk to Sangram and you start to dream big, it's like, well, look, let's say you segment your ICP and there's a vertical story here. Well, you got to tell that.
Yep.
Come and retarget. You want to say Terminus, where directors of marketing for tech companies do X. Whatever that is, we continue to personalize this, and that's, and the web personalization is really interesting to me because that's just, that's happening kind of with demand base. We're going to see more and more of this, which is, okay, you do get them to the website. We try to build these catch-alls for everyone. Well, how about not a catch-all for everyone? How about a catch-all for that person who comes in? So when I think about personalization at scale, I'm thinking about all the touches and how can we, in a scalable way, be able to deliver a message that makes it feel like this is not just one of the 8,000 products, but like I get you, personally, I get you, and I can help you solve that problem. And so that's how I think about it, and that's the game changer for me over the next couple of years. It's the only way to rise above the din, in my opinion.
Yeah. And let me ask a related question to both of you, and Craig, you probably thought about strategically with the companies you work with, and maybe David more tactically. But these are interesting questions. How to target more carefully, how to use more tools, do account-based management, other topics we've talked about. A more meta issue is your startup gets just big enough that you hire your VP of demand gen or director of VP of marketing or whatever, right? And they come with a set of learnings and experiences and biases because that's the way they did it at Zuora, right? Or that's the way they did it at Pick Your Company, right? At Pardot or Box or wherever, right? And how do you, in my experience, sometimes they're just, some folks are totally bleeding edge sales, marketing hackers, and they're all over this. But how do you drive these conversations? And especially if they haven't had deep alignment with sales and marketing. And maybe it's an amorphous question, but what's the counsel, right? And how do you get folks to start thinking about 2016 and these new things?
Well, going back to the previous question, I would say if you would have asked 3 years ago, what's the weakest part of Pardot, I would have said it's our marketing, right? So we're a marketing software company developing marketing software, selling to marketers. And from a company point of view, we really took the German approach to marketing, which is go hire a bunch of salespeople and forget about marketing. Yeah.
And what's the Uber learning looking back on that or reflecting on that? What do you tell your companies to do now or earlier from that experience?
Uber learning, number one, would be the biggest challenge that we had, at least call it 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, was a lack of market awareness. Right, we were running around doing all these cool things, adding all this value to customers, but nobody was searching for the term marketing automation. You can go to Google Trends and you can see the volume of the search term, and it's just dead. Like there is no market awareness for this thing that we were offering.
Yes.
Because there's no market awareness, SEO is not going to do much. PPC is not going to do much, and so we just literally had to hire an army of SDRs and just start banging down doors.
But isn't there a chicken and the egg situation? Because if the Google SEO is so great, that means there's already 10 great players in the space, right? So is this, I hear founders with angst about this. I'm not in a big enough category, but it's not all bad, right? And so your hack was, your hack there is you had a natural predilection for outbound, right? That's your DNA.
Yes, and it wasn't beneath us to do outbound, right? A lot of entrepreneurs, even entrepreneurs in Atlanta that I know, they don't want to have any salespeople. They're selling a B2B SaaS product, and they don't want any salespeople.
They don't. They want to be Atlassian or Basecamp, right?
Or MailChimp. MailChimp in Atlanta.
They all want to be MailChimp, right?
They're doing insane amounts of revenue and growing fast, and they have not a single salesperson.
Yeah, they were started in 1984 or something like that. Right. But it takes time, right?
They have over 500 employees in Atlanta and no investors.
No investment.
Right? And so other entrepreneurs see that and they're like, I want a SaaS product sold to marketing and I don't want to deal with salespeople. And it's like, okay, if you don't want to deal with salespeople and you're going into a market that has no market awareness,
yes, that's tough, right?
You have no chance.
Let's chat about that just for a minute to help other folks. So David, you're super charismatic and seemingly outgoing, right? But you are an engineer by training, right? Mm-hmm. So how did you decide you had a passion for outbound sales? Where did that come from? Did that come from your paper route as a kid, or like where does this come from an engineer turned CEO? Where did you learn that?
It was really out of necessity. Back in 2003,
Yes.
I built a web content management software company targeted towards the mid-market, universities and colleges. And so I did the whole field of dreams, build a cool product, hope that customers would come. No customers came. It was a semi-defined market, website management, web content.
So you had your own little MailChimp dream back then, that you'd build this great product and that they'd knock on your door.
Yes.
Yes.
And fell flat on my face. And so I started reading sales books, and all the sales books were talking about how to cold call, how to beat down the doors, here's the script, here's the activity-based type sales functions. And so I hired 2 interns from Emory here in Atlanta, and essentially the interns, it wasn't called that back in 2003, but they were essentially SDRs.
Yep.
And so they would call up, and they would call up webmasters at schools, and they would call up directors of IT at universities, and they would set up demos, and I would do the demo. So I was the product manager and the sales engineer and the senior sales rep giving the demo.
Yep.
And I had effectively invented a simple type of an SDR process. And so having that success more than a decade ago, when it came time for Pardot, I was like, okay, that's the same route we're going to go because that's the route that worked for me before.
Yeah, and when I meet founders and they talk about MailChimp and 37 Signals and Atlassian, I wish them the best and show them the door. It's nothing personal. It's just I think the odds of them getting to 9 figures in revenue usually, unless it's something uniquely developer-centric or otherwise, I think it's hard, right?
Those founders did not study their ICP, and they should not have even walked into your office, Jason.
Yeah, I mean there's plenty of. I mean, listen, you can build a Twilio with very little sales team till 100 million. You can build an Atlassian. Sometimes it takes longer. But I don't think it works as well with true B2B. But David, do you have it when you meet folks like that? Because you brought it up. What do you give them advice? Do you kick them in the ass like your experience? Because actually, that was my experience. My old boss kicked me in the ass when I was in this. He said, "Dude, you gotta get out there, get on a jet." Was my simple version of your story. When we started EchoSign, after 8 months, we had 1,000 customers and great logos, but we didn't have enough revenue, right? I don't know, we had 500K or something, right? It seemed horrible. It actually wasn't bad in 8 months. And my old boss,
that's not bad at all.
Office, he just took his boot out and nice guy in the world, and metaphorically kicked me in the ass. He said, "Get on a plane." Mm-hmm. So what do you tell founders?
I tell founders I'd like to put it in really simple terms. How well is your SEO working? Right? Because everybody does SEO.
Yeah.
Right? And they say it sucks, like it's just not working. I'm not getting any value from my SEO, and I'm like, well, why aren't you getting any value?
Yeah.
Well, because there's nobody searching for my terms. Well, why isn't anybody searching for my terms? Because there's no market awareness. Well, there's no market awareness, then why are you doing all these B2B marketing things? And so I try to paint the path to you need to pound the phones and get after them.
Yeah. Yeah, and Craig, tell me about it, because I do this really simple. I'm doing this now this whole month with the companies I work with. I try to make things excessively simple because that's my shtick, right? But I break the plan for next year into really 3 buckets, right? I call them the organic A leads. These are folks that have heard about your product and they actually come in, and some of them will buy, right? They come in through the door, and eventually you do get those. Eventually, Pardot's been around long enough that a few people have heard about it, and brand ultimately builds everything over the long term, right? So that's the A leads.
Pardot is 9 figures of recurring revenue now.
But it takes time, right? So that's the A leads.
8 years old. 8 years old.
You have very few, right? Then you get the B leads are usually generated by demand gen. You pay for them, right? And usually at least they have longer lead times, and at least the CAC is higher. And then the next category is outbound. Mm-hmm. Like you have the folks, you have the A leads that come to you, you have the B leads you generate, and what's your target for next year? 18 million ARR, right? Mm-hmm. Include upsells, right? Which is really category D. These are your 4 buckets, right? And I mean, is that too simplistic, or Craig? How do you advise folks? And you do anything along those lines or generate alignment around it? Because sometimes when I do that, people are just like shocked. And to me, these 3 categories plus upsells is all there is, right?
Yeah, no, I think that actually I was very excited. I didn't want you to see me writing it down, so I couldn't steal it. That's how good I like. Look, I too think that if we could simplify things, I think it'd be a lot easier. And I like those buckets. I would just say that category 1 is what David's talking about, right? Like it depends on the stage of the company. And category 1 and the dividends that you will receive from category 1 in the early stages of your life cycle are, when you're doing your planning, I would focus on category 2 and 3 probably most heavily. And so, yeah, I like that because then you could just talk in simple terms and big buckets. And so actually, I'm all in favor of it. But like I said, I mean, look, it depends on your market and who you are. The other thing I thought that, right when you were saying that I thought was really interesting was, have we seen the sort of reemergence of the importance of PR these days? When you talked about number 1, and I think we would all agree that these next legs up, the brand accelerates you. When you reach point X to get to point Y, I'm sure your portfolio companies come back and say, well, we're going to hire all these sales guys. But when you don't, you have to create this huge sucking sound where people are buying not always because of your sales guys. They're buying because they believe in the brand and they want to, come in and knock on your door. And, it's just interesting. When you're talking about number 1, I'm like, we in the digital demand gen age, we kind of poo-pooed the soft marketing stuff. We poo-pooed brand a little bit. We poo-pooed PR. But, when you said that, I just, when you look at all these companies that are like flying off the table, I mean, is there a reemergence there of the importance of the old school soft marketing plays here to fill bucket A in your list?
I'll tell you my learnings, but David, what do you think? What do you think of good old-fashioned PR in the age of 50,000 startups and 140 per YC class?
I hate PR. I'm not a PR guy at all. I'm just hardcore blocking and tackling, hit the front lines, grind it out. I'm not a PR guy at all, and that's frankly because I haven't done well with it historically, and so I'm just following the same playbook that's been working.
Yeah. I'll tell you my learnings. I share almost everything, as you know, right? I'll keep a few secrets, but I will tell you that almost every company I've invested in San Francisco, if you walk around, there's billboards.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if they didn't perform, there are reasons that there's Rainforest and Talkdesk and Algolia and other billboards. And but the learning from billboards, as an example, is you have to know what you're doing, right? It's so easy on PR and soft marketing and corporate marketing to flush your money right down the toilet, right? But the more it can be a second or third touch, the more your ACV is higher, right? And the more that you have a product where affinity with the CEO and the brander is important, you can get a huge lift. It's tough at $5 a month, right? But my secret sauce on the billboards and the radio ads is the 5-figure ACV going into 6, right? And and I've even learned now that we backed into this events business by accident, right? I learned about a booth, right? Like take a booth. Like it's not quite PR, but we can tell it. A booth at the SaaStr end of this year is like 25 grand. Like when I was a founder, I'm sure David was the same. That seemed like you want $25,000 to show up at Dreamforce?
Yeah.
That's what they wanted from us in 06. And so I convinced Blue Wolf to let us go in the booth, or my co-founder did, for free. And then next year it was agony, right? But you know what? I a company I invested in, and they were tiny. Last year at the SaaStr end, it was Rainforest QA, right? They had a booth. They didn't know what they were doing. They closed 2 50K customers from it, right? Boom, right? So scale matters, and I think now that there's more startups, finding the brands you want to affiliate with, right, and that you want to buy from earlier has more advantage because there's not as much time for this discovery, right? There's just too many products in the marketplace.
I agree.
And but it's also changed because back in the day, if you were like on TechCrunch, like. We launched EchoSign and TechCrunch January 1st, 06. Like, if you tack back leads, we probably got half our revenue from that. We got Qualcomm, BT, GE, Brooks Eckerd Pharmacy, which is now CVS. It's not they bought that day, but you could track it back, right? Because you would be on TechCrunch in 06 and the market was tiny, but you'd be on for like 4 days on the homepage. Now there's 1,000 articles on TechCrunch a day, right? It's big business.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I love that Jason talks about frequently that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't appreciate because they haven't seen it firsthand is really around that second order revenue, right? Having the mini brand and then going to the brand. It is so unbelievably valuable. But, you know, to an entrepreneur that's never done it before and it's got 500K of ARR or $1 million of ARR, they've just never seen it. But once you hit 5 million of ARR or 10 million of ARR, that second order revenue is so amazing. It's so powerful.
And PR can be, it's a great point because PR is many benefits. It can do that. Imagine I was telling my friend about Terminus or Rainforest, right? And I'm saying it's great. And you drive up the 101 and the Rainforest or Terminus billboard is there. And then you go to some event and the CEO's there and you read TechCrunch, all of a sudden you've got your third or fourth touch, right?
And then you go to CNN.com and you see a Terminus ad.
It's a Google search, right? And my other learning from SaaStr on this is what I didn't know is, because if you're going to do this B2B stuff, it's a long-term commitment, right? Is I didn't realize in the power of long-tail PR, right? So we did this series, we've done this experimental thing on SaaStr called Get In Early, where we profile SaaS startups between 1 and 10 million, growing 10% a month, more over more, with CEOs that we love, right? Those are the criteria. And the idea is it's for hires that you know, there's so many startups here in San Francisco, which one do I join? And we give you a few ones that are hot and they have to do a video. And the day it goes up, they get a few leads, right? The first order leads. But then later, like the power of having that collateral to reinforce the decision is epic, right? And so, I don't know, maybe Craig, it wasn't what you're getting at.
No, that was great.
PR is more powerful than ever, but the Uber learning with all this noise is the Uber learning it has to be more authentic than ever, right? In the old days, we were told to just blog. Right? And then the change a couple of years ago is everyone hired a content marketer, right? Everyone in the world hired some kid, now the kid may be 80 or they may be 18, I don't know, some kid to then write mediocre blog posts, right? Or back in the day, everyone wanted to have, what is it? What's the term? You guys help me. I'm sure you tried this, David. You wanted to be the oracle of your space. This is what HubSpot and Marketo tried to do, right?
Yep, you want to be the thought leader.
Thought leader. Everyone needed, like 4 years ago, everyone in the world needed to be a thought leader, right? And like, just how many thought leaders do we need in like ERP exactly?
It's a really sexy space to be a thought leader.
Right?
Hey,
it worked but the thought leader thing worked for a while. Then there were 10,000 vendors, and then it didn't work, right?
But going back to your point about being authentic, you read the SaaStr blog, and Jason has a certain tone and a certain style and a certain wit about his writing. Then you go to my blog, and I have a certain sort of straight and narrow and quick and to the point style about the writing, but it's authentic. It's to the person, and we both have good-sized audiences, and we both have our own sort of flavor and brand about it, and it's authentic.
Yeah.
By the way,
I got to get one last thing in because we're going to run out of time, and as usual, we get to about 3% of what we wanted to do. But there's one fun topic, David, that you're great on, and then Craig, I want to hear your thoughts. Right? Is stuff outside of the Bay Area, right? And so. David, you've had obviously huge success in Atlanta, both as an entrepreneur, and then you bought a skyscraper. How many startups do you have in there? Like 40 or 50 or something?
Not exaggerating, 260.
Okay, you have 260. Okay,
Yep.
And so but you've also thought through these issues, right, in terms of scale, right? And so talk about it. Talk about the pros and cons in general. If I'm starting a company in Atlanta, right, and then Craig, even though we're running out of time, I want to hear any different advice you give to folks about this topic, right? Especially if they're selling into tech, right, and have tech partners, right? If your partners are Salesforce and whomever, and they're all here, and you're in Atlanta, but it costs half the price, and what are your like top few learnings there, David, for us? We could do a whole hour on it, but
oh my gosh, tons of learnings. Learning number one is that if you're in a business that needs salespeople and engineers, Atlanta is amazing. Right, so Atlanta is the capital of the Southeast, and so we have thousands and thousands of sales offices, not just for tech companies, but for all kinds of companies. So Atlanta has an insane number of salespeople servicing the Southeast. So we got huge amounts of sales talent in town, and then we have unbelievable engineering. Georgia Tech's one of the top 5 academic schools. It's one of the 10 largest in the country. We produce 2,400 engineers a year that graduate just out of Georgia Tech.
Okay. That's more than Stanford.
So 2,400 new engineers a year, and then tens of thousands.
You're not counting like mechanical engineers or anything, right?
It counts mechanical engineers, but I have mechanical engineers that write code, right? All the engineers now.
Let's have a little fun with the mechanics. Okay, keep going. Yes. Okay, I hear you.
So what I'm getting at is you have a business that you need salespeople and engineers. Atlanta is amazing, right? So that means it's a B2B tech company. If you're doing a consumer startup and you need media and PR and you need stuff that's outside of salespeople plus just hardcore engineers, not going to be necessarily the best place from a talent point of view.
And what about going more true enterprise? What about when you need to learn how to do account-based management and field sales and enterprise sales for six-figure and up SaaS deals? You don't think there's any disadvantage to being in Atlanta?
Atlanta's great. We have 12 Fortune 500 companies, the third largest concentration in the country. We have the world's busiest airport, so we can take direct flights anywhere in the world.
Okay, I'm not going to get you to take the bait on this one. Let me ask you one last one, but it's good, right? Okay, let me ask you. So you don't think that. But this is good challenging, right? You don't think there's any sales or engineering disadvantage to being in Atlanta. It's good to challenge some traditional beliefs, right? You don't see any disadvantage.
On the engineering side, there's a lot more specialized experience in the Bay Area. Like if you needed machine learning or you need something that was really detailed. If you just need an awesome full stack developer, Atlanta is amazing.
Okay. One last question on that, and Craig, I'd love to get some of your higher level thoughts on it. So we're a great team in Atlanta. I can build it, right? And then my competitor, who also partners with Salesforce, is in one market, right? And they're there every week, and they're bringing them cookies, and they see them in the elevator, right? And how should I worry about that? Should I not worry about that? Should I move out here and leave my team in Atlanta? Like, I'm worried because they're also in one market, right? And I see on Twitter they're bringing cookies to everybody. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, are you trying to get me to say something that will hurt David's love of Atlanta? And
no, I think it's a fact. I think it's a great. It's an endlessly interesting topic. It's entrepreneurship more distributed globally, right?
No,
and I think actually, in my experience, where it bites you is at the management level, which is kind of what we're talking about, right? Everyone finds a way, right? And ultimately, it's kind of this. We started with alignment of sales and marketing, but it's really, can you get the executive talent you need to get from 10 to 50 or 5 to 15 or 50 and beyond is the big question to me.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, I do believe that you can get to 10 million in Atlanta and in South Dakota and wherever, but can you get to 100 million without having in tech, without having Silicon Valley-based executives? Without having sort of scientific evidence against it, except for the big ass companies that we've built in this place, I've just seen it where you've got to have a presence here, and in particular, if you're in sales and marketing and you're working with Salesforce and these types of, it's like, David, I want SalesLoft to have, they got to have someone here. They just do. I know you sent some of the guys that, in my opinion, this is where it's all happening and where we find the best talent and we have the best relationships and we've got access to the kingmakers and, I think you can grind. We've seen it enough. David, Pardot, everything, you can grind to a certain point. But when you got to make that next leg up in tech, it just, having experienced executives and the ability to work the 101 here is, like, to me, invaluable. That's my opinion, totally biased, 100% biased.
It's an endless discussion, right? It's an interesting one, right? The last one I learned, and then we should wrap it up, although I'd love to go longer. It was funny when I did this event with Ryan Smith, who's the CEO of Qualtrics in Utah, right? And they've crossed 100 million. And we chatted a lot about this topic because I did it when I was in London this summer with Euro founders, and my insights from Ryan, for what it's worth, was twofold. One, the Salesforce, like walking in one market, is not as important for his business, right? It's important, but it's not as important. Two, what he did as the company went through, in his words, 5 different phases as it's gone from 0 to 100, right? Never took any venture capital until they were at 9 figures in revenue. That'll sound familiar to David. Is actually, he agreed with the VP level thing as they got bigger, and he convinced them all to move out. The holes that he couldn't get, and Utah is you've got Omniture, you've got all this stuff, right? The folks that he couldn't get, he just said, listen, I'll pay you twice as much, and I'll give you 100 great people to manage, and you don't have to have the bullshit that you have at your company in the business. So come move, right? It's just a version of the story, and obviously it's a big success story. So, yeah. And I'd love to chat about all this stuff more and dig in, but Gretchen, I think we're out of time. So just a couple things to note that are coming up. Craig has his inaugural sales summit in April, right?
Thank you.
600 sales leaders from across every continent except Antarctica will be here in April. It's going to be pretty epic. So please come with that and check out more, and we'll link to it on the Twitter and the website when we get this up. David, and hopefully Craig too, but I know David will be at the SaaStr Annual February 9th, 10th, 11th, and you'll get to meet him, and we'll get David up on stage too in some fashion, which will be fun. And then the next one of these we're going to do is December 17th, which is that the day Star Wars comes out, or is it the day before? Do we know? This is going to be tough competition. With David Ulevich. David was one of the most popular speakers at the SaaStr Annual last year. Just a CEO and co-founder of OpenDNS, which went from freemium to B2C to B2B to 7- and 8-figure enterprise, and then right after that he sold the company to Cisco for almost $1 billion. So this will be a really fun update, and he's just one of my favorite founders. So that's December 17th, BB8 day. And David and Craig, thank you. This was terrific. We really appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Bye.